There is no smoke without fire. And in that regard, we were able to subject the details to our intelligence organizations, and they have provided answers.
Nigerian armed forces reiterate readiness to neutralize threats to security in Abuja and other states.
Nigeria hosts African Union members on peace support operations.
Good Morning Nigeria today focuses on the devastating impact of flood on Nigeria's economy.
Nigeria is indeed grappling with flooding in parts of the country, with about 33 states, including the FCT, affected by the disaster.
Well, it's been a sad tale of woes and devastation, from displacement of residents to loss of lives and destruction of property, as well as, of course, the flooding of farmlands.
And experts are lamenting the impact of flooding on Nigeria's economy, describing the situation as a crisis waiting to unfold with diverse threats to economic sustainability.
Well, they explain the adverse effects on the food supply chain, as well as disruption of the supply of refined petroleum products, as worrisome. They also indicate that the situation could worsen during the Yuletide, with likely artificial scarcity of food resulting in the high prices of commodities.
And Nigeria's agriculture sector accounts for about 25 to 30% of the economy, with maize, cassava, guinea corn, yam, beans, millet, and rice being the major crops. And analysts are of the view that it is at risk of a slowdown if the flooding situation lingers.
Well, Kiran, we hear that the flood is receding in some parts of the country as the waters are now finding their way into the Atlantic Ocean. But we also recall that when Nigeria experienced similar flooding 10 years ago in 2012, the agricultural sector growth slumped to under 2%. And if history is anything to go by, experts now estimate that Nigeria may have to brace up for a longer regime of higher inflation, escalation, of course, with regard to poor storage facilities and inefficient transportation of food items to the markets.
Now, a report from Jigawa State says the flood ravaged over 138,000 hectares of farmlands and displaced nearly 1,600, and that's 1,600 farming communities across 22 local government areas of the state.
Well, Nasarawa State had its own impact, Benue State had its own impact, Kogi had its impact, Delta, Anambra, for instance, and of course we also saw what happened in Bayelsa and what's still happening now in the River State. So well, it goes on and on, Karen.
Yeah, of course, even Delta State also got a taste of the bitter pill, as earlier in the year, rice growers reported that they lost more than 30 million naira to flooding, which destroyed a warehouse where paddy rice and fertilizers were stored.
Now, most farmers in the states of the Federation affected by flooding have, of course, some pleasant stories to tell about their losses. And authorities are alluding to the fact that many farmers losing their means of livelihoods could, of course, spell further challenges for the farming community, and more particularly the food security implications that would arise, plus of course, depletion in revenue, and as we have indicated, a spike in food prices. Kieran?
Yeah, now, of course, this development, many believe, remains unhealthy for Nigeria's economy, also exacerbated by high exchange rate and the Russia-Ukraine war.
Well, last week we looked at the floods in the states with guests from the states that were most heavily impacted. These states included Kogi, Bayelsa, Delta, and there were also experts who reiterated the need for the dredging of the country's two major rivers, that's River Niger and Benue. They also talked about planning properly, as well as desiccation of the dams as some of the solutions that could ameliorate or mitigate against incessant flooding being experienced in parts of the country. Today, of course, we'll be taking a look at the economic consequences of the flooding and, of course, what needs to be done to push back on these negative effects. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA.
Yes, in addition, flood has also affected socio-economic activities in most states of the country, including the Niger Delta, where many worry the menace will have adverse effect on the country's crude oil production. I am Kieran. We are live on the network service of the NTA, and I will bring you other segments that will make up today's package at the appropriate time. For now, let's join Anne Jibono, who has the morning news highlights. Hello, Anne.
Good morning, Kieran and Kingsley. Good morning. Here is the news. As the nation opens a new chapter in mining operations with the unveiling of the electronic mining cadastral system, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says the federal government will continue to intensify its regulatory and supervisory role in ensuring that mining is held to the highest standards of sustainable development and intergenerational equity.
Indices of development in the sector are rapidly changing. One of these is the increased revenue generation and, of course, the unprecedented investment interest that the industry has attracted in the past few years.
Nigeria is hosting Security Councils of the African Union member states in Abuja to learn and share experiences of peace support operations around the African continent.
The forum presents us the opportunity to deliberate on emerging challenges and address the multitude of questions arising from the deployment and transition of peace support operations, as well as highlight the way forward.
Working together to explore all the opportunities to make Africa more secure.
And the Nigerian Armed Forces are on alert to neutralize any threat to security in the nation's capital and its contiguous states. Minister of Defense Bashir Magashi said this while responding to lawmakers in relation to the recent security advisory issued by the United States and other countries. This was during the presentation of the ministry's 2023 budget before the House Committee on Defense. And the Nigerian Television Authority has put in place machinery aimed at reinvigorating the national broadcaster to meet its mandate in the light of current realities. The Director General of the authority, Saliu Abdulhamid Dembos, shared this vision during the 2023 budget defense at the Senate.
People also tune in to the NTA, especially at 9 or when you have your news, and you can take advantage of that. Some of these things that you see on the network and also programs and what have you are coming from the government. We have a social responsibility. We are not fully commercialized, so certain things must have to be done in the interest of the nation, sir.
Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso says if elected as Nigeria's president, unity, security and robust education will take the front burner from 2023. Unveiling his blueprint in Abuja, the new Nigeria People's Party's presidential candidate promised to turn global attention to Nigeria through robust economic policies.
Our government is not going to be the rigid type of government. We will listen to Nigerians because we believe at the end of the day, it is only Nigerians that can vote for president to be on seat.
In the meantime, presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Bola Tinubu, has described the organized private sector and government as inseparable allies that should combat joblessness and improve the gross domestic product GDP through strategic partnership. He made this remark at an interactive session with the business community in Lagos.
The such as light manufacture and non-food entertainment sector. Through active participation in digital economy.
Meanwhile, the Atiku Okowa presidential ticket of the People's Democratic Party is engaging strategic stakeholders in its efforts towards rebuilding Nigeria to an enviable position if elected in 2023. This formed part of issues at a media briefing by the strategic communication arm of the council in Abuja.
Our candidate is busy round the clock because one, he has the experience, two, he has the network, he knows who to talk to, and he knows what to say to them. He has the register, what we call register in literature, the right kind of communication.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley after this break. Do stay with us.
It's a new dawn for Nigeria. Oh, better days are coming. Better days that gives us hope and strength. To keep this hope alive, bring the smiles back to all Nigerians.
It's a new dawn in Nigeria. Renewed hope beckons on our people. The silver lining dots the skies. The firmament portents a bright future as the people of Nigeria move to vote a man whom they have come to trust for the realization of their aspirations for a better Nigeria. That man is Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. He has been tested. He can be trusted. Vote Asiwaju Bola Tinubu as President of Nigeria 2023. Vote Kashim Shettima as Vice President. Vote APC. Surely with Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the smiles are returning. We are close to home.
Bring the smiles back to all Nigerians.
The 35th National Festival of Arts and Culture, Ekona Fest 2022, with the theme Culture and Peaceful Coexistence, holds from Monday the 7th to Sunday 13th November 2022 at the National Stadium, National Institute for Sports, Lagos State. Time 10 a.m. daily. The official opening ceremony will take place on Wednesday 9th November 2022. Time 11 a.m. Venue Mobolaji Johnson Arena, formerly Onikon Stadium, Lagos State. Ekona Fest 2022, promoting culture and peaceful coexistence. Otumba Olusegun Urunsewe, OON, Chairman, National Festival Planning Committee, Announcer. Media partners: NTA, AIT, LTV, FRCN, Eagle 7, Sports Radio, and Biscon Television.
When times are tough, we know that as a mother, one thing you should never compromise on is your family's oral health, because they deserve the best. Oral-B, all-round protection. It's great value. It protects your mouth from harmful bacteria and also protects you against tooth holes and gum problems which can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your family's teeth and gives them all-round protection. So remember, protect their future. Oral-B for healthier, stronger teeth in just 1 week.
Our pastors, our imams, in every church, in every mosque, please realize that in the course of praying for peaceful and transparent elections, We all have duties beyond prayers. If we want a stable society before, during and after the elections, what should you be saying to those that worship with you? All Sundays and all Fridays, you are saddled with the responsibility of bringing up good generations. It is therefore your duty to both man and God to ensure peace all the time, no matter about elections alone. People talk to people and people listen. Talk to your followers. Make them listen to ensure peaceful 2023 elections. This message from the National Orientation Agency.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's time for business news, and we join our correspondent, Aleka Okpanachi Aruwa.
Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Mariam Katagum, has restated the ministry's efforts to support initiatives that will lead to economic growth and development, especially for micro, small and medium enterprises in the country. She stated this at the second Visibility and Awareness event of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, posed as showcasing the milestones and achievements towards strengthening the capacity of local MSMEs and manufacturers to produce high-quality personal protective equipment (PPEs) and healthcare-related products. She observed that since the inception of the project, 162 MSMEs have benefited and are benefiting from technical and training assistance provided by UN agency and UNEDO. She notes that the implementation of the project has contributed to boosting the economy and opening Nigeria's healthcare-related products to the international market due to the immense work which has gone into empowering MSMEs in the production of high-quality PPEs in line with international best practices. Katagum maintained that MSMEs are the life wire of any growing economy, as it constitutes the big pillar from which any economy can start from. With business news, Alika Opanachi, Aruwa.
Thank you indeed, Alika, for that business package. Next on Good Morning Nigeria is newspaper review. All right, it's now time for newspaper review, and I have the Sun newspaper here, Kingsley.
I also have the Punch newspaper. Maybe we'll also have the opportunity of taking the leadership once we're able to get a copy of that to project on the screen for you. But let's begin with the Punch newspaper. Of course, as always, the front page of the Punch is busy. Above the name flag, it's a sad story. It says Davido. That's the kicker. Autopsy likely as police free 6 workers and detain 2. Grieving Davido and Chioma keep mum as artists, celebs and fans lament Ifeanyi's death. Osun PDP suspends political activities. Atiku, Tinubu, Obi and governors condole. But that story, of course, relates to David Adeleke, otherwise known as Davido, whose 3-year-old son with his fiancée, Chioma, drowned in the swimming pool at his residence on Banana Island in Lagos. You can see the photograph of the 3-year-old they find there, also on the front page of the Punch newspaper. Why I'm better than Atiku and Obi on the economy. That's a claim by Tinubu. Details on page 27. How late Olumakaye battled illness in UK hospital, according to an associate. The late Olumakaye, of course, was the Bishop of the Diocese of Lagos, as well as the Archbishop of that area. Late Olumakaye was 53 years old, and he passed away some days ago. Dollar crisis, that's the kicker. EFCC plans massive raid on forex dealers. Naira's free fall worsens, now 856 naira. Abuja forex dealers flee into hiding. Kogi politician arrested with 326 million. BDC operators back commission. And you see the photographs there on the front page. Kogi State House of Assembly candidates of the NNPP and two others after they were caught with 326 million naira and 610,500 US dollars cash. And this happened on Tuesday. But according to the EFCC, and of course the story is also detailed there, this was the result of a sting operation. They had scammed the bank of some amounts running into well over 1 billion naira. And this was part of the loot that was recovered from them, including the Range Rover cars that you see in the photograph. That's the allegation by the EFCC. Federal government to concession at Jakarta and Itakbe. I'm saying Itakba there. There's no place like Itakba unless it's some location. It should be Itakbe. So that's the printer's devil that found its way to the foot of the front page of the Punch. Road contractors owed 11 trillion naira, according to Fashola. Campaign Kwankwaso to recruit 1.5 billion soldiers and policemen. Kieran.
Yes, let's turn to the Sun newspaper. The Sun newspaper, just beside the nameplate, oil marketers dump official ex-depot price as fuel scarcity persists. That's on page 2. And below that, we have, just as Kingsley read earlier on, EFCC arrests Kogi Assembly candidate with cash of 326 million naira. And of course, the lead story on the Sun newspaper today, Otom gives Atiku conditions for support. Warns PDP candidate of consequences of ignoring 5 governors. The full details of that story is on page 6. Now, 10 unidentified corpses discovered in Edo. The story is on pages 4 and 25. We are verifying security alert by U.S., according to Defense Minister. It's on page 26. On page 27, we have outrage as Davido's son drowns at home. Police grow in domestic. Well, of course, I think we read that. We may have to also discuss that in the when we begin to do analysis. Now, Carlo emerges 2022 Senator of the Year in constituency projects on page 3. Mbazulike Amechi exit of Last Titan. Of course, is of course one of the remaining first Republic minister. All right, now medical trip. Buhari not transmitting power to Oshimbajo unconstitutional, according to Clark. That story is on page 28. 2023, just at the bottom of the Sun newspaper. Okowa to Igbo, don't abandon PDP candidate, your son-in-law. All right.
Well, yeah, Kira, let's also look at the leadership front page. Some of the stories we read from the other two papers are also indicated there. For instance, Mbazulike, who was just passed on at the age of 93. Mbazulike Amechi was Nigeria's first Republic Minister of Aviation. And then the story of Davido being condoled by presidential candidates and others. Now, redesigning Naira won't check rising inflation. That's according to analysts. We're looking at the front page now of the leadership newspaper. Redesigning Naira won't check rising inflation, according to analysts. Ignore G5 at your own peril, or Tom wants PDP. 2023 campaign, Atiku, Tinubu, Kwankwaso offer solutions to ailing economy. And APC flag bearer targets 10% GDP growth. US to attract investments to Nigeria. That's according to Atiku, former vice president. Our job creation plan will reposition the economy. That's according to Kwankwaso of NNPP. Naira depreciates further to 800 at parallel market. And by Courtney decries picketing by workers at Lagos Airport. EFCC probes $6 billion Mambila power project. Terror alerts devastating to economy, according to the federal government. Kirian?
All right, now I think we should start from humanitarian. Sorry, the Davido's son's death. I don't know whether you had discussed that earlier on, or perhaps yesterday.
No, we didn't discuss it yesterday.
Because a 3-year-old child, was involved here, and you talk about domestic hands that we have these days. We have well over 8 domestic staff, and I want to believe that some of them would have been responsible for that child, at the time whatever happened. And these are, for me, is some level of carelessness. Of course, one could say yes, it's God's willing, but again, I mean, it could have been averted. I mean, if somebody has done his or her work rightly. So I feel for the family. It's a young family trying to build up, and they're losing a son at this point. I commiserated with them, personally.
Well, it's a very big blow to the young Davido and Chioma, his fiancée. That's our prayer anywhere around the world, is that we should never bury our own children. It's unfortunate that this has happened. And the police, of course, have already moved in. They've picked up some of the workers. 2 of them are still being held, while 6 have been freed. I don't know the design of the house of the Davidos on Banana Island. That's, of course, an upscale area in Lagos. But I tell you something. In Southern Africa, in years past, probably still the case, drowning was not an uncommon event, especially drowning in swimming pools, because most of the affluent neighborhoods had swimming pools in each of the houses. I mean, you had no cost to go to a public swimming pool. I'm talking about Southern Africa. If you were flying, for instance, and it's still the case, if you're flying over Johannesburg, you take off from OR Tambo Airport, and you'll be seeing small, well, as Nigerians would say, tiny bluish pills as they will appear from that height. Those are swimming pools. The same thing with Harare, the same thing with Windhoek. I recall that in Harare, the Herald newspaper, which was the government-owned newspaper, always took it as a front-page story if there was a drowning incident. And what then happened was there was a requirement, and this was strictly enforced, of ensuring that you had made metal grill and a gate to the swimming pool. That metal grill, of course, will make it more challenging for a toddler to crawl into the swimming pool, because the swimming pool is usually very attractive to children because of the bluish tiles that are used for it. So I don't know as I said, I don't know the design or the construction. Is there a metal grill around it? Is there a gate that, of course, a child cannot open on his or her own?
What funny thing, about the way we design our houses these days, but of course those who have the wherewithal in terms of the financial muscle, to engage in a modern architecture and all of that. People have swimming pool, even in the first and second story floors, they have even in the third floor, they have well beautifully designed swimming pools up there. And one would wonder anyway, why would you have swimming pool at different floors of the house? Well, you have the money to do that, but again, there are, of course, disadvantages to that. And even in my own village, I have somebody who has such a structure, and a swimming pool upstairs. I mean, it's risky, especially when you have toddlers, as this young family has, and it's a big risk, doing that, And again, I still blame the person that should be responsible for that toddler. I mean, that after all said and done, they have to do a 3-year-old.
That's 10 minutes on the road. That's the point. If you have what is called a suspended swimming pool, such as you're talking about, first, it's a bit complicated to construct, and more importantly, it's expensive to maintain. Exactly. Because water is very heavy. And for you to have, I recall there was this famous hotel there in Windhoek. It was called Kalahari Sands Hotel. They had a swimming pool right on the roof of the hotel in Namibia. But the key thing, Kiria, for all those because swimming pools are no longer very fashionable for us. Look, Okay, let me mention this where I lived as a foreign correspondent was my publisher's house. A very wealthy man, of course, everybody knows him. He's late now. It was, and the swimming pool was right beside the house. Right beside the house. Are you following? Right beside the house. Of course, there were no children around, and so, but it was also walled around, and then you had a gate that you had to lock at all material times, except the swimming pool was going to be used.
Okay.
So you went to other locations, it was the same. So if you have a swimming pool at home, be sure that there is a metal grate that it's like the balconies that we have. You know, when you have a balcony, and these days nobody uses the concrete balustrades. That is the concrete. Everybody is now using the either the wrought iron, or you are using galvanized steel or aluminum products. But you have to design it in such a way that because children are very adventurous, they sometimes want to play, by squeezing themselves in between the pipes. And sometimes they just tumble and fall. It's a very sad development. But of course, if there was negligence, then sanctions have to attach.
All right. Now, EFCC arrests a Kogi Assembly candidate with cash of over 326 million naira. So, what are you talking about here? Because my mind, goes straight to the current decision by the Central Bank of Nigeria to launch redesigning and exchange of naira. Because a lot of monies are being carried in bags, and like somebody just sent me something on the platform to show people who stock some naira,
already
rotten naira, inside a truck, big truck. So what is that supposed to mean? It means that the people are stocking naira somewhere, some burying it underground, and what have you. So what's the essence of that?
Well, I'm sure you have also read some comments, and I mean, it will be difficult to disagree with those comments. That look, Nigeria is not a poor country. You just have, as some of the comments have said, just wicked, selfish, and greedy elements who are taking these monies and burying them. And now that you have this kind of policy, everyone is scrambling. I find that the money, of course, is already rotting, and so on and so forth. But I don't see why the EFCC should be announcing, planning a massive raid on forex dealers. No, and this is part of what I thought the central bank should have done, to say, look, you call in all the other agencies, don't operate in a silo. Part of what you want to do is to be sure that there is no dirty money in there. If I say dirty money, some will say black money. I mean, we are black, so we don't say black money. Blood money, dirty money, filthy money, money from corruption or from fraud and all kinds of things. You don't want that money polluting the economy. So what EFCC should have done, and I think they should also do it, look, there is a limit to cash transactions at BDCs. So you set up sting operations. What are sting operations? You pose as though you were going to exchange money. Any person that exchanges such money over and above the required limit or the stipulated limit, the person gets into the can. And you do this, on a wide scale across the country at different times. You've got already, they have announced, that's why I'm making this comment. But I should imagine that is part of the plan. You do this repeatedly. If the BDC themselves, if they know that, or the Bureau de Change, or those malams or whoever they are changing money, if they know that they will be in the can while the matter is not being resolved before January 31st, nobody will touch dirty money anymore. So those who don't have the money, we will see where they will. Those who have the money that they are hiding, we will see where the thing will go.
As a matter of fact, a lot is going to happen, when that process begins. And
you and I have been seeing you have been seeing the videos. Some of them have been doing them as if it's grains that they are putting on the,
Exactly. And, of course, many people have spoken against the plan by the CBN, but we are beginning to see some of the advantages.
Is it timing?
The timing is also good, because politicians are also mopping up some money. Politicians are also part of this thing.
The politicians already mopped up theirs.
They are mopped up. They are also working with the BDCs and what have you. So they could also be trapped in the process, because they may inject that kind of money into the political process, and thereby being able to buy voters, as the case may be. So that's also going to work.
So if EFCC doesn't have enough personnel, let them hire personnel from other anti-corruption agencies. NFIU is there, ICPC is there, and they have sting operations. So the more of the forex dealers you are able to raid, and the more of them you take into the can, and then begin immediate prosecution. Then when you bring your, I'm not saying your money, I don't know how much you have, but
all right,
yes.
we'll just have to call it a day here. Yes. I know on newspaper review for today. We thank you for staying with us. We will return again tomorrow with this segment. For now, let's take a short break. When we return, we shall be looking at the devastating effect of flooding to the nation's economy. Do stay with us.
The security situation in Nigeria has been reasonably stable in spite of activities of unpatriotic elements engaged in various criminal activities around the country. Daily situation reports coming in from states. 2 months ago, it has shown relative peace on many of our highways, such as Abuja, Kaduna Birnin Gwari, Sokoto, Zamfara, Kaduna.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. For safety at home, still be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dsspr@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
What we face mostly now are flashes of cowardly attacks from the rump of groups that have been routed in one location or the other, moving to another to give the false impression that they are still strong. Our ultimate goal is to eliminate them altogether and restore total and lasting peace over every inch of the Nigerian soil. Sounding tall, we take it home. We are determined to ensure that every inch of the Nigerian soil is safe. That determination is there. The order has been given. But we shall continue to protect the lives and property of Nigerians and foreigners in our midst. We shall continue to work for the peace of the nation and deter elements that constitute threats to the people. We shall bear the full powers of the government to secure every inch of our land. We shall not rest until peace is fully restored to Nigeria.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. The Nigerian Television Authority (NTA), in collaboration with Havel Corporate Concept, presents Beyond the Debate, a series for all the 18 presidential candidates in the 2023 general elections to present their manifestos and visions to the Nigerian public as a social contract. Beyond the Debate will broadcast live on the network service of the NTA and stream on YouTube and other social media platforms beginning from 10th November 2022. The publicly signed manifestos by the candidates will be uploaded on this portal, www.summitofpoliticalparties.org. For further inquiries, please contact Dr. Padanga 08033173488, Howard 08033121022.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, as a prompt for our conversation, which is on the devastating impacts of flooding on the nation's economy, we take this background out by our correspondent, Joseph Osen.
Years of investment were trillions of naira washed off in 7 months. Authorities report the 2022 flood has recorded more than 600 deaths and displaced an estimated 1.4 million people. About 100,000 houses, 140 hectares of farms across 33 states and the FCT submerged as Nigeria faces one of its worst floods in decades. The flooding is already taking a toll on Nigeria's economy as inflation surges to 20.77% in September 2022. It is not just about the submerged buildings and large farmlands, but disruption of supply chain of food, petroleum products and other production items as flood waters are taking over federal highways and bringing down bridges. For instance, fuel tankers conveying premium motor spirit PMS to North Central and Abuja along Lokoja Abuja Road were stranded for about 3 weeks because of the flooding crisis.
It is clear to us that there will be a food crisis in the state. Right now, Bayelsa State has been totally cut off because corridors to the rest of the country, which is through River State and Delta State, the east-west road on both ends have been cut into two.
Many businesses relying on fuel for energy are still counting losses, while prices of food items have continued to increase, with economic experts attributing it to shortage of supply and cost of transporting goods through alternative routes.
Fundamentally, the economy is in cost of living crisis. You are in cost of living crisis when an average household, his income cannot compete with various demands of that household. That is the first crisis.
Like Nigeria, the International Monetary Fund has warned that the recent incident of flooding in some states in Nigeria will worsen food insecurity and lead to further increase in food prices across the country. It has stressed the need for immediate social assistance to affected persons and businesses. But how far can this go to cushion the impact and help businesses rebuild after damage done to some lifetime ventures? The devastation of the flood on the nation's economy and a way out is what will engage guests on Good Morning Nigeria.
That's Joseph Osem with that background report. And now joining us in the studio to discuss the topic is Emeka Okengu. Emeka Okengu is a development economist. We're glad to have you today again.
Glad to be here. Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. And also with us this morning is Kabiru Ibrahim, member, Board of Trustees, National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. It's also a pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
And part of this conversation is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Professor Emmanuel Adano. Professor Adano is Director General of the National Water Resources Institute in Kaduna. Professor Adano, we're glad to have you in our studios this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, of course, you see Professor Adano presently on your screen, and there he is, the regular face, as I said, on Good Morning Nigeria. We're expecting another guest to join us. I want to begin this conversation with Professor Emmanuel Adano, and I never forgot what you said on Good Morning Nigeria some years ago. that flooding is not altogether a bad phenomenon because of the alluvial deposits and the nutrients that come from other places to fertilize the soils. But today we are looking at the devastating consequences of the flooding of 2022. It appears that the flooding is receding in parts of the Federation, but just give us your general assessment of what we have been faced with this year.
Well, in terms of the flood, just as you mentioned, some years back we said flooding could also be profitable if it doesn't affect some critical infrastructure. It can deposit materials for agriculturalists. It's also a way of recharging your aquifer, the groundwater, which is normally I'll call it your balance of water, like a savings. Flooding does that, especially in some parts of the country when the groundwater recharge is very small. And now, but when the water is too much for you to contain, and then starts affecting some infrastructure, it becomes a problem. And that's what has happened. In 2012, we noticed that a lot of infrastructure in the country were affected. Roads, houses, agricultural appliances. But what we also noticed was that while these things were happening, we had the opportunity to summarize some of these things and make some adjustments in case a similar thing occurs in a foreseeable time. But statisticians will always come up and say this is a 60-year flood, 30-year flood, and all this. So we relax. After it happens once, now we'll be expecting another 40, 50, 60 years for it to happen, statistically. But statistics is just an interpretation of things human beings do. So we didn't prepare for this one. It could happen again next year, but are we prepared sufficiently to curb it? We're not.
Okay, Professor, I'm not stopping you.
Yes.
I just want to, add something so that you can a little bit give us a clue of what actually happened. Because I spoke with you on the phone some weeks ago with respect to the flooding, which of course we were expecting that may come. And you told me the flood that we had then could be flash floods and not necessarily as a result of the release of water from Yadu Dam or dams elsewhere outside Nigeria. Now, what actually happened that this flooding has surpassed the one we saw in 2012? Because 10 years ago we had a similar thing, but this seems to have surpassed it in terms of overwhelming devastation that came with it. So what actually happened? I'm not taking us back, but because you are here, we're privileged to have you here today as the professional. We'll be able to now make it clearer as to what happened. Is it the release of water from other dams or for floods as a result of a heavy rain?
Yes, thank you. That last statement is good. Result of heavy rain. Even the release from Lado Dam in Cameroon also was as a result of heavy rain. But incidentally, this year, we had a rainfall that surpassed the one of 2012, and it was concentrated in a short period. If I take you outside the Benue and Niger Valley, because most of these releases flow along these valleys, the V-shape, Jigawa has no direct link with any of these major lines. But Jigawa was flooded, and almost annually Jigawa gets flooded. Because the rainfall that happened in that area this year, the rainfall about 4 years, happened in a few hours. In a few hours. So those intense rainfall concentrated over a short time, high intensity, in an environment that cannot transfer water easily because of the flatness. The channels are choked, very flat, and floodplains are available in the environment. So there was no capacity of this thing to convey and discharge elsewhere. And that has nothing to do with the Benue or Niger Valley. Now, Labdo Dam, because it is a culprit anytime we have a flood on that line. Labdo Dam has 8 billion cubic meters of water. The total volume of water that comes from Cameroon to Nigeria, according to our measurement, is about 13 billion cubic meters. Part of it is below Labdo. Now, if you release all the waters in Labdo, at the time, it can flood the environment. But you are releasing at a time about 600 cubic meters per second. You are releasing at a time. That is, in a day, it's about 50 million cubic meters of water into a valley that is already saturated due to the ambient flow within Nigeria, not from outside Nigeria. The valley was already saturated due to the ambient flow from other rivers, Taraba, Donga, Kasinala, many other rivers. So downstream of Labdo was already saturated, and they had to release the water because it would threaten the dam itself. And if the dam breaks, that volume will come to the valley. So they are doing it as part of the operations of the dam. So that volume of water just added to a saturated environment. That's what happened.
All right, Professor Emmanuel Adano, thank you very much for your opening comments. Let's bring in Architect Kabiru Ibrahim. Architect Kabiru, of course, you are also a farmer, and you've discussed agricultural issues here with us on Good Morning Nigeria in the past. What do we know at this time as to the ravages of the floods in different parts of the country? I mean, we hear that 33 states of the Federation have been affected by floods, but what is it that we are hearing from farmers, at least in the interim?
Well, farmers all over the place are crying from losing every livelihood, every plantation, and in some areas a good chunk of it and all that. And this portends trouble for Nigeria, because already we have been contending with the insecurity, lack of mechanization, not very good seeds, the inflation, general inflation, the purchasing power of the naira and all that. And now this flooding is almost a pandemic, because it is affecting everywhere and everyone. As you said, the economy of the country is in trouble because of flooding. You have shown even the movement of fuels and all that is being affected and all that. And the farmers also transport whatever they have on these vehicles, and they go to the places they want to go on these vehicles, and everything is in that all over the place. And as Prof said, this is a systemic release of water from a place where if it is left, it will even fracture the whole place and everything will be turned upside down. And then we have had more rains than was even expected from anywhere by any analysis. And you remember also that sometime in February, the NIMET even gave us the predictions, which we told our farmers, and we told them where to avoid planting and all that. But all those did not help, because where we didn't even anticipate flooding, it occurred. So there is a lot of desperation or despondency amongst the farming community in Nigeria, because even the farmers buy food. No farmer provides everything that he needs, so they also go to the market. And to my dismay, even those things that we thought we had sufficiency in are now costing very high. The local rice, for instance, is about 32,000 for 50 kg bag. The imported one is about 42,000. So and the wages are stagnant. They remain the same. I'm sure the NTA has not changed salaries here. So people still go to the market and buy these things, and they are very exorbitant. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that we are fearful that there may be serious turbulences in the food system. And anybody who thinks that that will not work is just living in denial.
All right, we are not praying for that to happen. I like it when you said no farmer farms everything. So one way or another, a farmer goes to the market as well. So you'll be affected by any challenge along the chain, of food delivery. Now, have you taken time, or perhaps you could say that it's still fresh, to know number of farmers affected by this disaster, and the number of acres of land, the kind of crops affected? Is it that all the crops produced in Nigeria will be affected by this flooding, and what have you? And if you have data of the number of farmers or farmlands affected, how are the farmers, they tend to put all that together to present their challenge with respect to financial losses, crop losses, and what have you?
Just like we don't know the number of farmers in Nigeria, we probably cannot know exactly I'm from the exact science.
You have farmer associations.
But now I'm coming to that. We have farmers and farmer leaders who come to say all of our people lost everything that they have planted, all the rice they planted, all the vegetable, sometimes all the corn and all that. But you do not have hard facts. And we are all Nigerians. It is foolhardy to come out here and tell you that this is the percentage, or these are the number of farmers that have been affected. But I can tell you also that it is also possible to have an educated guess. If you take Jigawa, for instance, where Prof mentioned, there are some regions where the devastation is total. Yeah. People lost everything. And the scientists say that there is some variety of rice that will resist flooding. But if the water does not recede for 5 days, even when the crop is blossoming, everything will be lost because the water has refused to recede. But the logic is this, that because rice is also a flood crop, it needs a lot of water. People tend to think that no, it will get up. But then because of this devastation, what we have seen now this year, we have seen that these whole places were cleaned up. So even those who did not lose 100% will now say that they lost 100%. So in a nutshell, what we are working with is the farmers who planted rice in that region lost almost everything. And our advice to them is go back to those places when the waters recede. Plant. Harvest also where the waters refuse to recede to those places where there is no water. Use even manual canals and all that, take water there, harvest it, and plant from there. And learn to do this activity the year round. That is the only way, because Nigeria has to just look inwards. You can see this flooding is almost all over the world. I mean, you see flood waters spending days, weeks without receding, even in the United States, where all the infrastructure and everything is available. Okay. So this takes me to a fundamental issue. The changes that came about due to the climate. We have been in denial of this for a very long time. Even with all the advice and all that, all the things that we should do, we have not come to terms with the possible losses that we can incur from that denial. And this is where we are today. Nigeria today, God forbid, may encounter more serious problems than we have been having. And you remember that over the last 2-3 years, we have just been seeing or witnessing a continuous degradation of our incomes or our purchasing capacity. The naira, the value of the naira is dwindling. Some of these prices that you see in the market have got so many threats that bring them about. The purchasing power of your currency is very low. There is scarcity of that food item. You cannot also import from anywhere to augment what you have internally. So the only thing left to you is to look inwards, invest properly, and put people who know what to do to be in charge of the planning or the policies that you have.
All right, Architect Kabir Ibrahim, thank you very much for your comments. Let's bring in now Dr. Emeka Okengu. Dr. Emeka Okengu, of course, a development economist and also another farmer in our midst. What's your reading of the impact of the floods this year?
Reading is bad, but let's not look at reading. Okay, I think we should look at maybe what we call the collateral mistakes at both ends. The first collateral mistake will be that we had over 20 years to plan this, and those who are supposed to have thought it through didn't. Two, we are still living, like my big brother says, in total and complete denial that the world has moved on. You're no longer talking about floods that happen because of torrential rainfall. You're talking about floods, that happen because torrential rainfalls happen because of climate change. Okay, so it's important you put that back element, because this is where this whole story will begin to take shape. Because if you appreciate and understand that even your networks, okay, can occasion some movements of your water movements, normal networks have been traced to cause tsunamis, cause hurricanes, cause movement in waters and weather and all that, then you begin to now tie this problem to where we should have started from. And each time I have the privilege and honor of coming to sit here, I keep telling people STI. Because STI would have given us a proper program of containment. Again, when you talk about flood, remember that flood is like
what the STI means.
Science, technology, and innovation. Now, remember that
this is a money program, so that somebody doesn't start assuming that it's something transmitted infections.
Okay, so remember that, flood is water. And like they say, what is power without control? So it is all about how do you contain this flood. My big brother architect Kabiru has talked about people going into canalize their farms. And I want to ask him, what about these floods? I mean, do you know the amount of reptiles that these things is bringing along? That man puts his foot into that river and is eaten by a crocodile, okay, or eaten by an anaconda. In fact, there's one that have shown that snake is so long he could stretch, the full length of this. So it's a lot of danger. What about the poisons? What about the salines that are also coming with these floods? So I think what is important is that we first and foremost place this blame, okay, where we should. And it is the failure of our policy makers and policy implementers not to have thought this thing through. Before I now go to what we can be able to do right. Because in the first place, the meteorology people can say to you, we're going to have 1,000 millimeters of rain, 2,000 millimeters of rain, that in these areas ABC. And we are talking about rain-fed agriculture. We're basically saying nothing, sir. Because if you're talking about being able to contain that flood, if my statistics is right, at one time, China developed a technology that they started freezing their flood waters. Okay, they could contain it and freeze it because they started building containment systems. And these containment systems will have to do with how you are channeling this thing. We'll have a lake that has dried over 92%. Okay, that is within our territory. And a lot of programs, Dr. Danu, as director of dams, that's when I met him a long time ago, might be able to tell us if it was possible for us to also channel some of these floods that are coming to start trailing back into the Lake Chad that has all the space to be able to now contain them. Today, we have a lot of programs that are going. People are talking about food insecurity. People are talking about, we have a national disaster. We have a national disaster because in the first place, for northern Nigeria, what they do, a lot of these farmers save their foods in what they call rumbu or rambu. I don't know if I'm getting the word right. Now, those things are made of mud. And you can be certain that all of them are gone. So it's not even what you have on ground or what you have on the ground growing that's a challenge. Your storage is also gone. Remember also that our national strategic reserves, from the last count I had, I don't think anything is inside there. I don't think any of them is functioning fully. Okay, so why we are where we are today, gentlemen, and Nigerians listening to us is because Nigeria has not recognized that, yes, rain-fed way of life is fine, but it's not going to be feeding 200 million people. What we need to do now is, first and foremost, what are we going to be doing to be able to convert this water called flood into water that can be put to use? And remember, it is not only farming you need water for. You also need this water for electricity generation. You need it for so many other things. So what I'm saying is, why are we not considering, okay, what you call a proper development program that is able to put us in a good state, and we actually can start praying for these floods to begin to come? Oga has talked about torrential rainfalls. He's talked about flatlands. He's talked about us not, okay, look at Aba, for instance. Okay, Aba is flooding because of just somebody's refusal to open up the channels. And your refusal to open these channels because a lot of big people, a lot of strong people have gone to buy land and built on these channels. And you don't have that political will to be able to take those things down. And water must find, his way. So what's happening is that while you're looking at this flooding as Lado Dam, torrential rainfalls, can we also look at the human infrastructure and human, contribution to it? 80% of the places that are flooded because we don't have proper drainages. Now, this is where we also now need to bring in our building, oversight capacities. So it's not just about rain falling from the sky. There are a lot of factors that we need to put into consideration here. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, I think as we make progress in this conversation, we may have to clarify certain things that you mentioned here with respect to the possibility of deploying science, technology, and innovation in all of that. Now, let's return to Professor Adanu, who also I met for the first time as the Director of Dams at the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. Now, we have a number of dams in this country. Of course, I think you and I were involved when in 2014 in a water week in Sweden, in Stockholm, Sweden, where of course we were told that Sweden has over 2,000 dams. And these are people who are less than 12 million, people, So what has been happening to these dams that we have? Because of course the economic importance of dams cannot be overstated. And if you have rain, and to have dams, perhaps to contain them for a while, perhaps to release them gradually and what have you, that would have made sense. So why is it that many of our dams actually, in fact, majority of our dams are dysfunctional?
Well, I don't know what you mean by dysfunctioning.
Well,
or whether they are not utilizing them, or the dams are not providing water. I don't know. But then, let me get, okay, let me just.
That's why I raised the point.
In 1995, we had a master plan, and in this master plan, there are categories of dams that should be constructed in Nigeria. Some for agricultural purpose, some for flood control, others for even hydropower development. We have that. Now, we intended to be following this strategically. Maybe hydropower, depending on the power we need, then agriculture, because these are very important sectors. We haven't followed that trend sufficiently. I remember in 1994, the proposal was to construct about over 280 dams, I remember, medium, large, and small. Now, we still have to do that. As he mentioned, you can use a dam, one single dam, for several purposes. For agriculture, even to withhold water at a time you don't need it downstream. Release it when you need it, so that flooding, when heavy rainfalls come, these dams can trap them. So the major streams or major rivers will be free of this flooding we're having. So we can use dams for this. We need to have a comprehensive commitment. The plans are already there. We have the dams. Let me draw your attention to the coat of arms, the Nigerian coat of arms. Look at it critically. Just look at it. The shield to protect the nation there is black because of the soil, fertile soil. and on it you have flowers sprouting and all this. Then a paw, a Y-shaped paw, wavy Y-shaped paw, that is a river. Those two rivers, perfect drainage. Has Nigeria looked at the coat of arms as the major symbol of our development? We just have it there, we look at it. Nobody knows exactly what it means. Do we respect it as the major resource in Nigeria?
A philosophical foundation
of the creation of this country. Nigeria was Niger area, a name given by a journalist, sure, who married Lugadle eventually. But prior to that time, the name was the region of territories of Niger area. Everything is built around River Niger. Have we really philosophically looked at Nigeria as an environment that can create its wealth from these two items?
So where is the challenge? Where does it lie? Is it in implementing the policy?
Yeah, I think it's implementing and looking at what we have there and seeing whether we can really rely on this. And
okay, well, Professor Adano, thank you very much. I've had the privilege of visiting some dams in some parts of the country, small, big, and medium. Some of the small dams, you look at them and you're wondering whether it is our gutters or just trapping running water or otherwise. Well, one of the early achievements, or one of the achievements in the administration of Brigadier Obemudia's military governor of the Midwest was the construction of Ojirami Dam in Edo North. It was very famous then, very popular. We had excursions to visit the dam, and you saw how the dam operated. But some of the latter ones that you started seeing in different parts of the country, like people were just running away from implementing what ordinarily should be implemented. Of course, we know what that means in broader terms. We'll come back to that, Professor Adano. We earlier indicated that we're going to be joined by another guest, also well familiar on Good Morning Nigeria. Is with us now via Zoom. Dr. Chris Akio is the convener of Integration Summit Group Nigeria and also President Emeritus of Ijaw Youth Council Worldwide. Dr. Akio, we're glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria today. We want to take advantage of your knowledge of the Niger Delta area. The last time we had you, we were talking about crude oil theft, and of course you provided a great deal of insights into what we needed to do to stem crude oil theft. But we have also seen the impact of the waters, at least from some of the visuals that were posted online, Bayelsa, Delta, that's to say Delta State itself, Rivers, and parts of Imo and Anambra. What do we know at this time about what has happened with respect to the flooding of 2022?
Right, thank you. Good morning, you out there in the studio, and good morning, viewers. Okay, so it's an interesting conversation. It's all about the River Niger and River Benue, and perhaps government lacks attitude to following the master plan has been talked about this morning in the studio. What we have experienced in the last 40 days or more has been very devastating for the citizens, for the economy, and for the country. The River Niger, perhaps part of the Benue, have overflowed its bank, and all those volume of water have been dispersed into communities, large communities displacing over hundreds of thousands of people in the last 40 days, destroying homes, drinking water, electricity infrastructure, road infrastructure, food, and also putting life at risk. I'm from Patani. Patani is sitting right on one of the tributaries of the River Niger called the River Forcados, and that of course gets into the estuary to the Forcados terminal. What you're seeing right now on video is a typical example of what has happened in entire Bayelsa, and about 6 local governments in Bayelsa, 10 in Delta, parts of Imo, Anambra, and River State. People livelihood is taken away from them. The East-West Road is completely washed up in major sections where there will be need for new infrastructure. And then the basic thing is that we as a country have not thought about climate change or not thought about being proactive over the years. This flood started basically in the last 10 years. 2012, we experienced something almost this magnitude, and then it went to sleep to 2017, came in 2017, in 2018, in 2019, 2020. We had a break last year, and then it came back with this energy. This is the highest we've experienced. I live in Patani. My investments, for instance, are all gone. Hospitals, businesses. And I even feel more sympathy for those who perhaps are living in mud houses. That's what they have. They will get back at the end of this flood. They can't find a home to go. Those of us who have fish farms, of course, is history. Those who have farms where they have done planting is history. And sadly, there is no blueprint or roadmap for insurance of all these things in our country that is sustainable. So it's a loss that is gone. No amount of palliative can make up for those people who are feeling this pain now. So what does the country lose? These common farmers are the ones who provide the basic necessity for day-to-day food in the country around, be they tomato farmers, rice farmers, or cassava farmers. All those crops are discussed. So there will be food shortage. It means therefore we'll pay more from pocket or from government will have to import food stuff. Now, sending grains, for instance, to the south will not solve the problem. The people of the south don't feed on grains. It may help in the north, you understand that? So there's an economic impact on that. Now, the infrastructure is also gone. Government will have to reinvest. Our take home from this will be that the design of the East-West Road must change. What has happened is that they've used clay to do holding banks and fill with sand. Now, once the flood comes, it dissolves those clay and then the sand wash away. So they need to design it and cast those roads properly if it must survive the test of time. It means that's the way to go. Because in 2012, it got washed off. Now it's washed off again. And not only washing away, but it has also taken lives in those areas where people have drowned. And then electric infrastructure is gone. You also heard about the LNG where they had to shut down because they could not carry on with their gas. So I think the country must be more proactive. We hear about this dam in Cameroon that they always use to control their own flood, and then they release water and then it turns us into an ocean of some sort. And we hear there's been a dam in construction for God knows when, and we don't know why it's not been completed. I think we need multiple dams in the stretch of the river Niger and Benue, particularly those ones that can be used as gate control dams. And like the last speaker said, dams are not waste, they are they have economic value. They hold water, they control the flood, they can be used for electricity generation, they can be used for agriculture and all of that. So I think the Ministry of Water Resources, the federal government, the ecological fund, the Ministry of Environment must put a think tank together that must design a one-stop kind of dam that each dam can serve multiple purposes and then we have economic value for it. If we do not do this, we do not know, we cannot predict how often these floods will come. And I think that there's no other option than to find a way to do construct dams and then dredge the entirety of the river Niger and river Benue because they're already very shallow. There's a lot of silting in there. In my place, when I was younger, 30, 40 years down the line, you could take a dive like a cliff from the river back into the river. Today, you can trek kilometers on water because it's shallow, there's sandbanks everywhere, and the tributaries have been blocked. So when the water, the same volume that used to come 30 years down the line, comes now, they find a shallower bowl of the river. So the rest of it percolates into the communities and then the flood communities. And then once there's this additional heavy rainfall or dam release of water, everybody is underwater. And you can't move communities. For instance, I don't know where you're going to move 10 local governments away from Delta or the entire Bayelsa state. I don't know which state to accommodate them as their own state now. So the choices are to find man-made interventions that can control water flow in the river Niger and river Benue, to deliberately dredge the river Niger and river Benue to its original depth for the purpose of not just dredging, but to allow also for movement of vessels. So that dredging.
Well, I don't know.
It looks like, yeah, there's a freeze there on the Zoom connection.
Yes, because I wanted to really do a follow-up, on that. If he's back, let us know, please, if he's back. He's back. Dr. Ekio, we've listened to you attentively, and I understand your explanation. But I want to add this. Do you think that the governors of the South are doing enough with respect to efforts towards mitigating the floods. Because, of course, some 4 or 5 months ago, NIMET and other agencies did alert the nation on what is going to be expected this year with respect to flooding. So it's a known fact. Now, are they doing enough? You mentioned the Ecological Fund. You mentioned the Ministry of Environment and what have you. And at some point, some person said that, governors, a state cannot build a dam. But for me, that is wrong because, of course, if a state determines to build a dam, the state can. So are you now saying that the federal government must be part of this mitigation effort? What are the subnationals doing to mitigate that, especially the south area, which everybody knows the water area, so to speak, right? So of course you have said that growing up you are close to water, and patterning your area, of course, there is along the coastline. So what do you think the governors did not do, or what do you think they should do for now to help the people over there who are suffering from this flood?
Thank you very much. First, before you start asking if governors can build a dam, you need to also find out what right do the governor.
Looks like bandwidth. But Kira, I think we'll keep your question for Dr. Akiyo to respond to once we're able to get back to him with a larger bandwidth. I think that's where the challenge is with him. Dr. Akiyo, if you can hear us, that's fine. We'll get back to you, and Kira will repeat the question. I want to come back to Architect Kabir Ibrahim. Yes, we can apprehend the magnitude of the losses suffered by, say, farmers and other persons who have lost their homes, their property, and so on and so forth. But I want to look at it essentially from the perspective of farmers. It is for purposes of occurrences like this that you have insurance. Where, for instance, will the agricultural risk or credit scheme, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what the full rendition is. Can Nigerian farmers, organized, unorganized, or otherwise, say, okay, we will fasten some of our hopes of recovery on insurance payouts for the losses that we have suffered?
Well, you see, there is work in progress between the farmers and NAIC. We made a proposal, I believe, I even went to NAIC to pay a visit, that we, beginning from the time that I was the president of Poultry Farmers Association, this is very high risk business, poultry. Mm-hmm. I realized that just like in any other thing, Nigerians are not very keen on taking insurance. So I discussed with the farmers, broadly, and then suggested that we should have some form of fleet insurance across the board to begin with. That every farmer should come down with a premium, something that is affordable, mm-hmm, on various crops, and that we would take this insurance from NAIC, and we don't wait until we want to borrow money. There is a precondition that when you want to borrow money from the bank, you do insurance. What about when you are not borrowing? So we should have insurance across the board, and then the insurance company will have a lot of money because we pay the premium in one clean sweep, and there will be a large sum of money set aside for insurance. So if, for instance, like Bielsa, we had Tuesday Night Live with the governor who said he was an IDP even at that time, I think 2 Tuesdays ago. The situation there is very pathetic. People have lost their livelihood and all that. So if there were insurance, for instance, these people would be compensated appropriately, and if there was a compendium of them and a lot of money is attached to the insurance company. But with outside that, as he said also, that government cannot give sufficient palliative to take everybody out of poverty. The losses are colossal. The devastation is monumental. There is no way government can bring out monies that will adequately compensate these people and get them back into business. So it's a very difficult thing, but we have been advising farmers to run their agricultural businesses as a business, not as a chore that they have to do to feed themselves. But once you do it as a business, insurance is also fundamental in it. So let the word go forth to everybody now, to every farmer, that it is imperative that they take insurance to safeguard this kind of thing. And once this continues, it's affecting the whole world. When you talk of this in Nigeria and we are providing solutions and all that, we are forgetting that there are countries that are developed that have been using some of these things, and they have the devastation of flooding. These 2-3 years have brought a lot of havoc to the world. It's almost Armageddon in some places. Everybody is losing hope. There are many challenges, many shocks across Africa. I remember that this year I attended the Kikao conversation or discussions in Kenya, and we looked at the total African economy, Africa agricultural economy. It is in shambles. People are crying all over. And you remember they did the AFGF in Rwanda, and I was there. We saw it, even our former president Obasanjo was there, and so many ministers were there. So many of these things are not only peculiar to Nigeria, but insurance is very, very important, as you mentioned. People should take insurance, should insure their investments. Otherwise, they will not get adequate compensation. And there is no government in the world that can give sufficient palliative. And then, as the doctor said, if you give anybody in Bayelsa Ogun, for instance, what would they do with it? Maybe they will make beer. But certainly it's not going to help them. So if we are talking of the strategic reserve, and what we have in the strategic reserve are grains and probably gari, that will only be okay for. What about the perishable things? Where do you store them? Our power is not such that we can store these things. We cannot elongate the lifespan of some of the vegetables, and you cannot, if they give you rice without anything condiment to put to make it, will you just eat rice on its own? So we have to do more serious assessment of what is happening. And the whole thing is everybody's problem. I'm not going to start this blame game. You are blaming this. But we are all Nigerians. And then we must make sure, especially because of politics, because we vote people into power.
Architect Kabiru, before we go on the short break, still on the insurance, I would like you to elaborate further. I didn't get the bottom of what you were saying in terms of work in progress with the Agricultural Insurance Corporation. What is it that we know at this time? Yes, the farmers will need to be enlightened, educated. Marketers from the insurance firms will need to also go to them, and so on and so forth. But what is the situation? Can those who are insured look up to the insurance firms to say, well, this will be some compensation?
Well, let me be very honest with you. NAEC is almost moribund. We are not encouraging patronage for NAEC, because if you look at the CBN and Koboroa, they are patronizing various mushroom insurance companies. That is why, in fact, if they are even complaining now that the repayments of the Ankoboroa loans are not forthcoming. And most of the farmers who borrowed from the CBN under the Ankoboroa are claiming that they lost everything, even from 2021. In Katsina, I have something that is writing that the farmers lost 1.7 trillion in crops, and that came after they borrowed money on the Ankoboroa program.
All right.
So you must be very careful. The NAEC thing, NAEC is the government formed insurance company that should cover agriculture. We should promote the patronage to that thing, that place.
Kabir Ibrahim,
yes,
thank you very much. He said that the claims came after they had borrowed money and have brought everything to flood, and who is going to pay back? Well, now, if we have a good insurance, right, then insurance could come in, the government could also come in, so that by the time they get from insurance, you need to have a good premium, and the government could also add up something in terms of compensation for those who have farms, not all those paper farmers that we have. All right, Dr. King, we are going to take you on some of the points that you raised earlier, but not right now. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with the conversation. Do stay with us. Some Good Morning Nigeria for this Wednesday.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Kirian, before we went on the short break, we were trying to prompt Meka Okengu for further clarification of what some of the propositions he made earlier.
Yes, because he introduced the STI, Science, Technology and Innovation there, and we want to find out how efficacious that could be if it is deployed, and what nature of technology are you preferring to assist in this the curbing of this menace, or in terms of mitigation and what have you?
Netherlands is practically under the water, so it's a very good example of a country that has functioned with STI, and as much in the water as they are, you rarely get to have the challenge of flooding in the Netherlands. They have been able to convert their water sources into a very innovative use. And as small as that country is, it's turned out to be one of the biggest producers of foods across the globe, everything. And it is all about technology. Very simple, sound, doable technologies. First and foremost, we'll come back to Prof. Prof talks about flatland, talks about silting, okay, talks about channeling, talks about control, talks about containment. Now, these are not rocket science, Ogakiran. These are very simple, everyday to do things. But you need to have a proper understanding of where this flow is coming from. Now, everybody seems to focus more on the Lado release. And I've said to you that so many other factors that you need to take into consideration. Town planning, for instance. The day we get our town planners to begin to look at how houses are built, where they are built, okay? Now, what kind of control measures are also put? What kind of gullies you have? Take, for instance, our highways. I want you to take a drive down there. You'll be very shocked that a lot of our highways don't even have gullies, don't have gutters. Highways. And these are things that can be able to actually create a lot of, crisis for you. Take our habitations. Now, when NIMEC releases these figures to say people should move to highland or upland, what about the houses that are built that could also be a very major challenge to holding torrential or flash falls or water or whatever? So it's a whole gamut of us not understanding that this is not all about prayer. Okay, it is all about what we call PPAs. All right, you have government people say, oh, let us pray that the next year the rains won't be much. People are praying for rains. Because the more rains you have, the more productivity you have. And Prof just said, looked at it from a very philosophical, perspective. We'll have two major rivers that are supposed to be flowering the country. That's basically what Prof Sadeno was trying to describe. And when I cast my mind and look at that thing, he actually begins to say to you that the control of those two rivers is the make or your man of your development. So in very simple language, where does meteorology predictions meet the housing design needs, meet our construction, meet our infrastructure? And then let's come down to farming. Who is a farmer? Yeah, my big brother, respected architect, he's an architect first and foremost, that's his profession. And if you see him in and out of his farm, you're not going to be seeing, architect Kabiru carrying a hoe and a shovel and a basket on his head and he's going to farm. I don't think that will happen. And even if we did, it will be a cultural photo shoot. Okay? I want to reckon that when you go into his poultry or his farm, you're going to be seeing a farm that has proper delineation, that has proper irrigation, that has proper channels, that has proper drips, okay, that has proper equipment. Now, this is what a farm is supposed to be. So it's also important we disaggregate what we call gardens. Okay, yeah, for you guys who are in the press, you want to give it some colorations by saying, no, it's not pedestrian. I'm looking for the word you use in the press now. I get it. Something that describes the person, as a pedestrian farmer. Okay, subsistence. Now, And then you look at this subsistence farmer man, he grows maybe 1 or 2 acres of okra. You don't have that land captured in any system that you can monitor on real time. An institute like NIWR should be able to have a system that looks at it on a real-time basis to be able to say to you, this is where this flood is now, this is what damage is done, so that you can be able to advise the person. Now, but we don't have that. Meteorology might be able to go to Ministry of Agriculture and say, okay, please, let me see your situation room. What they're going to be showing you is what everybody is seeing on the screen. Okay, whereas they should be able to say, we have 300,000 farmlands, okay, hosting A, B, C, D, E. This is where ICT comes in. And I'm not talking about rocket science. We're not even going to be reinventing any wheel. You can actually use Google to be able to do this. It's all about using Google and using your maps to be able to now juxtapose those farmlands into things that you can be able to identify, okay, empirically and on the ground.
Okay, Dr. Emeka Okengu, thank you very much. We understand that Dr. Chris Ekiyo is back to us via Zoom. Dr. Chris Ekiyo, thank you once again. As you said, your bandwidth was pretty low for us to get in touch. At some point, it's just been made about town planning and the way we construct. And I want to, Chris, you're familiar with this. Benin City is one of Nigeria's best planned cities. Best planned. When the Portuguese first arrived in the 15th century, Gonzales, 1424 thereabout, one of the remarks he made was how well laid out that city was at the time, and still is. Now, growing up, this is now in terms of construction. On major streets, because Benin City is in the rainforest, the heavy amount of rainfall that used to fall, when houses are constructed, before you enter a house, you will climb several steps. Several steps before you get into a house. Now, with, of course, modernization, road construction, and the raising of the roads, some of those houses, you may just think that they are flat on the road. But beneath the road, there is also a master drainage system that Ogbemudia constructed in the 1960s. So, again, which raises the question that Kyria was talking about. Can we also begin to prompt our state government, other state governments, to look more into master drainages, particularly to deal with urban flooding, and of course river flooding? That was an issue relating to desiccation and damming. Dr. Chris Ekiyo, I mean, I've noticed this myself in the Delta. If a foundation is, sometimes some of those houses, particularly low-income houses, are just flat on the ground. Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. Quickly, first I want to key into what you started by asking what are the roles of the governors. The governors are on their own not going to be able to do anything in terms of what we are experiencing today. So there must be a collaboration between the federal government and state government as to new master plans in terms of housing design, in terms of drainage construction, in terms of dredging of the River Niger. And then, you know, all the things we've been talking about is about commitment to processes and systems, which is lacking in governance structure today in Nigeria. Whether it is the design of the houses, if you bring those plans, the people who are supposed to supervise the implementation will get corrupt and then take bribe and then put it away. There are buildings now in Benin on the moat. It ought not to be so. There are buildings in drainage pathways in many modern cities in Nigeria. It ought not to be so. It is so because people get corrupt and then they allow themselves to be bought in. So also in terms of farm catchments and all of that, we used to have the extension workers that were posted to farmlands to guide and help farmers. These days, they employ such people, they keep them in the office to carry fires. So we must overhaul the system. What we're seeing now is an indication of systems failure or lackluster attitude by operators of system to enforce what hitherto exists. We had this town planning thing, physical planning thing, the Ministry of Agriculture is there. Most of these farmers and the insurance policy that we're talking about is not sustainable. People get insured. They don't get to find the insurance company to pay them because first, just any mushroom organization will be recognized by the approving authority as an insurance company. So unless we get thorough with doing what we need to do and become sincere
with the appropriate insurance. For instance, the CBN or the Bank of Agriculture or Industry, all those banks must work out with known industries, with insurance companies with capacity to take this kind of loss. No insurance company will be willing to pay anyway, because it's going to be colossal for them. How much will these low-income earners insure? So yes, planning and designing is one thing, but the major thing will be first to have gate control dams, to open up the river Niger and Benue properly, which is the responsibility of the appropriate ministries of government to do that, and then to enforce certain fiscal planning laws in the country. That's the major thing to solving this problem. We must do that. If we do not do that, you can't continue to blame people. That's where they were born. They were born in our area, for instance. I grew up in Patani. Our parents, hundreds of years, have lived there. It wasn't flooding. It settled there because it was the highest land they can find in the Niger Delta or the Deltoic area. It wasn't flooding 50 years ago, 40 years ago. This is a new finding. So there's climate change involved. There is a neglect of the river pathways that government hitherto is supposed to happily maintain and help develop. Somebody talked about what's happening in other climate. Venice, for instance, Rotterdam experienced the flooding. They worked it out. In Florida, in all those areas, there are sometimes overflowing of the ocean. Those are systemic things. But we are having a pattern now where if nothing is done about those two major rivers, flooding will be perpetual. And then we roll out hundreds of millions in palliative. Those hundreds of millions could have been used to fix the problem, and citizens will be comfortable helping themselves. Citizens are not too interested in palliative. It doesn't solve the problem. It makes a mockery of the kind of help that they get. So I agree, we must look at issues from an economic state of it in terms of National Council of State, in terms of the governors and the federal government sitting together and setting up a technical committee to come out with a long-lasting solution. Now, I'm not talking about the committee that will be there 3 months, 9 months in the Hilton, a fast operational committee that will be given a timeline. We have all these things in the archive. It's a matter of just piecing them together, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and then upgrading what was produced some time back to fit modern systems. For instance, adding the Google map on some of those things. And we must change our pattern. Some of the things we call farmland, yes, are subsistence farming, but that's what we have. We do not have known mechanized farmers anywhere in the country, because the anchor borrowers is also focused in giving people small money to open small backyard farms. There is no direct or deliberate effort by the government to grow farmers, to have one farmer that can feed the whole state. In some countries, one farmer produces enough for his state and even more. So we should move to that kind of farming where the insurance is big and then it's sustainable. What we have now are small farmers doing 1 acre, 2 acres, and all that is gone. Nobody's going to be able to pay insurance. They don't even have the tools to work, let alone to insure. So it is government, again, that must help its citizen. Government is omnibus, it's big, has capacity to borrow, has capacity to take the shock. So government must deliberately create a policy, but enforce it totally. Not these for political gains. You give some of your political party members some benefits, and they can then come and tell you flood has washed away the things, so they won't pay back. That's not what we're talking about. We should qualify people.
Dr. Kio, thank you very much indeed. You have addressed some of the issues that we raised, but of course you've not spoken much about the responsibility of governors of the states that were devastated by this flood. They were informed about this about 5 months ago. What action did they take in terms of physical presence, in terms of trying to even build flood walls? What did they do? And when it comes to water resources, it's on the concurrent list. When you talk about agriculture, it's on the concurrent list. Do state governors know even the number of farmers operating in their states? What are the agricultural programs in their states? When this issue came up to say, look, there's going to be this flood, what did they do? So when we give a lot of challenges to the federal government, when the states are there, some state governments are building airports, which means they are buoyant enough to embark on such projects. Why can't they embark on projects to mitigate flood when they were duly informed? That is what we're talking about. Because if they did something, of course, a federal government will augment. But sitting on the fence and saying there should be a broader plan, the plan has always been there, like Professor Adamu pointed out. We've always had a plan. But who is executing this plan? What is the role of the subnationals in all of that? I hope we have time to talk about that more. But let me bring Professor Adamu once more to say, look, how can we deploy the construction of dams to handle this issue? Since we have dams that are functional, can they be reactivated?
Yeah, well, reactivation of dams, probably the silted one can be desilted. Now, the non-functional ones, for instance, maybe the gates are not working fine, those ones can be corrected. Now, the silting and also dredging of the rivers that we are talking, I'm going to put this together with dam operations. Now, if you dredge these two major rivers, when you dredge a river, you're increasing its capacity to convey more water at a time. In which case, the ambient flow that causes flooding because of the flatness is reduced upstream. Now that it's conveying more water, where are you discharging that water to? It is the Niger Delta. It's the Niger Delta now that we're complaining about seriously. Because the rivers don't have capacity to contain this, and they are bringing more water and discharging there. So what we can do is a total look at the system. One, when the dams are constructed upstream, those dams will not release water at all, only in the dry season. Now, when they release water in the dry season, the Niger Delta cannot just be flooded, as we say. Maybe there's sufficient water for them to do the ecosystem, because the brackish water, which is the interface between the seawater and this, has a system. Now, in the rainy season, these dams upstream that have been emptied in the dry season will now contain the water. They will now hold back these waters. So the rivers are still flowing just slightly above the normal dry flow, because the tributaries contributing water into them have been dammed and water has been stored. So in the dry season, you release again. Now, the release of water in the dry season can be used for navigation. If you do your dredging, you have enhanced the valley. So when you release this water in the dry season, a certain volume of water and height is attained, so you can do navigation all the way. So in the rainy season, when you're holding this water back, the rainfall plus ambient flow downstream will still increase the height of the river to that navigable level. You still be navigating. Meanwhile, you have already protected the inflow that should be coming from elsewhere by the dams. So we have to find out those dams that will be useful for this. While we dredge, we dam.
Finally, is there any way these floods can be directed to Lake Chad?
Well, that's a very big thing. That's reversal of flow. It's sometimes very difficult. But let me tell you one thing. If you direct the water that flows downstream, upstream, you are forgetting that the ecosystem of the downstream has normalized itself to the flow that comes annually. If you reverse it,
using STI,
not comprehensively, just take a bit of it like a pipeline.
And feel it.
In the rainy season, for instance, when the water is too much, you can take up there. Let me tell you, there's a design, there's a proposal for Lake Chad, transferring to Lake Chad from
the Benue
Congo. Congo. That's the major one, which may not come out eventually, because it's a very, very difficult.
You know what, Professor Adano?
You can. Go
ahead very quickly.
Okay. There is also an interbasin water transfer that the ministry is proposing. This is the Hawa water transfer. It's from the Benue, a tributary of the Benue, actually, Congola. They want to take it through down to Maiduguri and then Howell and all the way down. But this amount of water required cannot fill Chad. It may not even reach Chad, because on the way there's an environment which is very, very permeable, called the Jerry Bowl. It can go in there, fill the environment completely with water,
and saturate.
Saturate, and then
Professor Adano, this is a larger conversation we're going to have, because it's come up a couple of times now on Good Morning Nigeria. And I remember citing the example that in California, I had read sometime in the past that, look, through hydrological and mechanical engineering, they're able to pipe water to flow up mountains and then take them to the required locations.
They can do it anywhere.
Yeah, fantastic. So, As I said, it's a conversation we will return to because the consequences of this year's floods will continue to linger. There are persons who are still in IDP camps, and I had also raised a couple of days ago whether they had social workers who were ministering to their needs. On that note, we'd like to thank Dr. Emeka Okengu, a development economist and also a farmer, for being our guest this morning. Architect Kabir Ibrahim, a member board of trustees of the National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria. Always a delight having you on the program. Via Zoom, we were joined by Dr. Chris Akiyo, President Emeritus Ijaw Youth Council Worldwide and convener Integration Summit Group in Nigeria. He joined us via Zoom. Chris, we appreciate your comments this morning. And last but not least, Director General, National Water Resources Institute in Kaduna, Professor Emmanuel Adano. Glad having you on Good Morning Nigeria again today. So, that's it for us on the program for today. Thank you for being with us. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good day.